we are ready to start our next panel that is dedicated to the financing and transition, and actually will bring some insight to all the initiatives that were undertaken so far and that needs to be ended successfully in order to have really decarbonization that we are all longing for. In that respect, I would like to ask to the stage our distinguished guests, Mr. Kirill Ravnatsky, CEO of Bulgar Transgas, the Bulgarian gas TSO, Mr. Martin Georgiev, CEO of the National Electrical Company, Mrs. Maria Rita Gali, CEO of DESFA Greece, and Mr. Craig Dyke, Executive Director, National Energy System Operator. So thank you very much for joining us today here. First of all, I would like to really open very briefly this discussion and to try to facilitate it only with some few words that I really need to make to give my statement as director for the transmission system operation of the electricity system operator of Bulgaria, ESO. I would like first of all to say a very simple thing. An electrical power system, in order to be secured and in order to have security of supply, needs to be operated in constant balance between consumption and generation. Second of all, in order this system to be able to withstand any certain changes in its behavior or the so-called disturbances, needs to have enough ancillary and grid-forming services inside of it. Third of all, a system, in order to be really financially liable, it needs to be operated in a very secure, safe, but also economic manner. Having in mind all this, I would like to say that our systems so far, they are built and they are operated as it was 40, even 50 years ago. What do I mean? We had enough generation in order to be able to cover our peak demands. We have limited interconnectivity, which allows us to transfer power flows between our systems with our neighbors, and also to work in secure manner with the rest of the countries of the continental Europe synchronous area. My second statement comes from the past. I'm going back to 2017, where we had this cold spell all over Europe. What happened back then? If you remember, there were extremely low temperatures and extremely high demand all over the continent. But from perspective of the transmission system operators and the stakeholders that are producers and also consumers, there were two approaches for facilitating this situation. First approach that we used was just to really close our system and rely on our domestic production, which was the old way. Second approach, which was used in Central and Western Europe, was really to make the maximum use of the interconnections, of the interconnected grids, and a deep level of harmonization between the transmission system operators, between the coordination centers and between all the stakeholders, in order to be able to withstand to this cold spell and to overcome the increased demand that was all over Europe. So, my third statement in this regard is that now we are decarbonizing. And this already is not a trend or something that is fancy and needs to be respected in some really small level, let's say. But it becomes really a way of living. It becomes economy. And within this economy that is already dependent and will be much and more dependent on the renewable power sources with uncertainty in their primary fuel, namely water, sun and wind, we have to cooperate. As operators, we need really to cooperate on, I would say, next level, really to go beyond the boundaries of our systems, beyond the boundaries of the regions, beyond the boundaries of the different types of transmission systems and different types of fuels that are used, and waste electricity and energy to be provided to the homes, to the houses, to the businesses, and so on. So we made this initiative really on as a TSOs in order to reply to all these market changes and all these generation fleet changes that happened to us in the last several years. I will give you just a brief example from the Bulgarian power system. We had for the last 3 years an increase of 3 times of the renewables that are installed. And actually what we are producing from these renewables and what is consumed from our houses is actually extended twice. So our system is really decarbonizing fast. Even this year we have an increase of 60% of the production of renewables and respective increase of around 40% in production of conventional thermal power plants that are fossil fuel based. This is happening all over our region, and based on the coupled already energy markets that we have and in which environment we are operating, now we are able really to transfer huge amounts of electrical power between these systems. Another figure. I can tell you that at the moment Bulgaria has available transmission capacity for exchange of electricity of 4,300 megawatts, with a maximum load, with a peak load of at the moment 5,600 to 700. Haven't seen the figures for yesterday, that's why I'm saying 5,600 megawatts. There is a possibility, due to even finance, our system to be fed and our load and consumption to be fed from outside through these energy exchanges. But in order this to be fed, we need to have secure system. We need grid forming services, we need storage, we need ancillary services. This will be the second part of our discussion that I'm willing to facilitate. The first part is regarding the networks. The more we increase the network, the more secure we get, because we are overcoming a lot of events that are happening due to weak networks and caused in the past some separations that we faced. The last one was in 2021 actually, when Europe was divided in 3 parts. And also it helps us to really transfer huge amounts of renewable energy that can be used at the sites that it is needed, and not limited only to some small areas around the production sites where it can be produced due to the uncertainty of the primary energy source that we'll be using in the future. In that regard, on regional level, we started one project that is already set up, and we are working on this with the help, of course, and support of the US TDA in order this to be facilitated fast, and also some market analysis to be done, which definitely is not within the core business of us as TSOs. This project called among us East-West Corridor at the moment is actually uniting the TSOs of Turkey, Bulgaria, Greece, North Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro and Italy by by this feasibility study that we are preparing, we are expecting that by the end of next year, we'll have actually the final physical amount of new power lines that needs to be built both inside of the systems and between these systems in order to facilitate and to be able to transfer 4,000 megawatts more than we are able to transfer today. The other part of this extension that is needed for our region is the so-called North-South corridor, for which we already had this discussion with our colleagues from all the countries, starting from Greece to Poland. And we have the willingness, even there is a project under consideration in the 10-year net development plan of NSUI regarding this corridor. What I'm saying all this is, I'm saying all this because today, just today, I saw really that we as technicians and the politicians, we are thinking the same way. We want a green future for our kids, and we are ready to push and to invest to make it happen. So thanks to this, and having in mind also this really common will that amazes me for construction of these corridors and to transfer all this renewable energy, I would like just to make my final statement here, because when you have so many renewable sources, it's normal your system not to be balanced at all times, but to have times where it will be in excess and times where it will be in scarcity. How do we overcome this? Since at the moment we have quite a limited possibilities to store energy. What will happen to this system? How this would be tackled in the future and how this will be handled? Actually, already there is a really pan-European understanding on this that is including the fact that these networks cannot be already looked as separated networks, electrical network, gas network, hydrogen network, and so on. But there is a need for common planning, for common building, and for common operation of all these networks. That will be the networks of the future that will help us to overcome the scarcity, to overcome the excess, to be balanced the whole time, to be able to store the energy, and to provide this green future that we are talking about. But since I'm really not an expert in the gas networks, I would like to ask Mr. Ravnachki now to elaborate a little bit on this story.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? All good? Perfect. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a great honor and pleasure to be part of this event. Lovely introduction on our topic. I'll try to give a bit of different view on what we are about to discuss. When we speak about the energy transition, I always give example, and I always go back in time when we had the previous energy transitions. One from wood to coal and the one from coal to oil. For those transitions, it usually took 100 years to happen, and for them it was typical to be energy addition rather than transition. We're in a much different situation right now. We have 25 years in front of us, and we will try to completely change the energy foundation of the economy. This is quite a challenging thing to do, but it's not impossible. As a gas TSO, Bulgartransgas is dedicated in finding the best solution in terms of infrastructure and providing the infrastructure that fits the needs of the market participants, because gas has a major role in this energy transition. And not only as a bridge fuel up until 2030, but also as the much needed energy fuel that brings the balance between the different energy sources in the mix. I think we'll all agree that there is not a single energy source that can solve the trilemma of affordability, climate action, as well as competitiveness. So I think gas has a major role in that sense. And when we speak about gas, I think in general, when we speak about the climate change and the transition, it's very important to speak about cooperation. From that perspective, I'm very happy that Maria is here today with us. And together with DESFA, we've been working in a very, very good cooperation, both in terms of the Alexandroupolis FSRU, as well as in terms of the vertical corridor. Because the vertical corridor is a major thing, and it's an important road that provides the necessary energy security, not just for our countries, but also the energy security for the whole region. It's a greater cooperation, not between just Greece and Bulgaria, but it's cooperation from 7 different countries, which is quite a step forward. Then when developing the gas infrastructure, we should also think on how this can pave the way for the low carbon gases in the future. From that perspective, Bulgartransgas invests in 2 directions. One is a completely dedicated hydrogen infrastructure. Again, with DESFA, we're working on this quite extensively. And additionally, we're also investing in doing the studies on how to adapt the existing infrastructure in the so-called blending with hydrogen. All this somehow paves the way for the climate change, for a better future for the next generations. But as I said in the beginning, we need to do this quite swiftly in a period of 25 years. And this means that there is a need for huge investment for a very short period of time. In order to keep the cost for the businesses and the end users at such levels that they are competitive both on national and international level. So from that perspective, I think it's very important that and it's worth mentioning that the different types of financial instruments as well as grants would be of vital importance in order for us to achieve those goals that we set today for the near future. And I think I'll stop here.
Okay, so thank you very much. Maybe Mrs. Gali from DESFA to take the floor from here, because I heard that in the future we are waiting for the hydrogen to flow through these networks. But what about this exchange between the countries and between the regions?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to the Bulgarian pavilion to join this very interesting discussion. Before talking about the future, so the future of the decarbonized gases, I think it's very important, also in line to what you said before, that we do understand already how much natural gas infrastructures are effectively offering storage to the renewables. Let's say Greece are a country which is blessed by a lot of renewables. Nowadays we have many days in which renewables exceed 50% of the total electricity production, but this brings various consequences. The first one comes with wind, where we have swings between 40% and 0% of the total energy production on a day-by-day basis. And the second one is, of course, the time, let's say, cycle of the solar panels, the photovoltaic energy production. At the end, already today, what is happening is that the natural gas pipelines and the LNG terminals are providing the storage which is available for the gas power plants to kick in when wind goes down. And let's say, this is sometimes an element that sometimes I believe is underestimated, and we will have more and more as gas TSO be able to price it, because to increase the financiability and the let's say financial sustainability of gas infrastructure when the demand will go down, we will have to attribute the right value to these flexibility services. And the same happens for the solar, where we are packing up the pipes during the sun hours, increasing the line pack in the grid, and then when the sun goes down, our line pack, of course, declines. All these elements, combined also with the fact that most of the new power plants have the ability in the future to burn heavy, important mixes of hydrogen and gas, indicates that, let's say, these infrastructures have, let's say, not only a role to play, but really are today critically integrated with the electricity production. And let's say more and more when it comes to discussing business plans about new infrastructures with the financial institution, with the European Commission for grant financing, it is important that we let this flexibility component emerge and, like in the electricity, price it. Because this will really, in my view, enable to more correctly place a price to the capacity that the gas infrastructure system are already providing.
Thank you very much. Yes, system of systems, where all type of flexibility will be used in order to really facilitate the balance, which I would say that, at least from my perspective, is maybe the most vital thing, because it helps the system keep running and the consumers to be supplied. So thank you for this, Maria, and with these remarks, it is absolutely natural to go to Mr. Georgiev, who is CEO of our biggest production company, with a lot of storage included in its portfolio, but maybe he will give us some insight on his future plans, because he's now also facing some challenges, having also classical thermal power plants within this portfolio. Mr. Georgiev, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be in this esteemed audience, speakers together, and of course the moderator. I feel somehow swimming in own waters here together with the TSOs, because our company is working in very, very close collaboration with the Bulgarian TSO. As being producer, owner and operator and producer of flexible energy and storage, we actually provide close to 80% of the system services in our country. So we understand very well the crucial importance of being able to provide these services, and of course to extend these capabilities in line with the trends which are happening with increase of the unstable, unpredictable, often share of renewable energy, and decline, of course, of other conventional so-called sources of energy which traditionally were used for balancing the system services. Of course, I fully agree also that gas has a crucial role, and it plays a crucial role at the moment, gas-fired generation, in this aspect. I think that decarbonization has more or less two aspects in the increase of renewable sources. One of them is amount of energy which needs to be produced, which is demanded by the consumers. This is to large extent, I believe, under control, or it can be solved, this aspect. However, the other bigger problem is the discrepancy between the times when renewable generation produces and when consumers need this energy. We experience this very well with the sharp increase of especially photovoltaics in our country. We have close to 4 times increase of installed capacity in photovoltaics in the last 4 years, which leads to excess of energy, what Mr. Zarchev mentioned, during the so-called photovoltaic hours, and scarcity or shortage of energy in the other hours or in cloudy days. So the crucial role of storage is actually to bridge these types or pattern of production and also the needs of the consumers, and to bridge it, of course, at affordable for the consumers' prices, to flatten a bit the price curve which we see during the day, and of course to help to the consumers make use of the cheap, as we see, or competitively priced renewable energy which we experience. So in this aspect, and operating close to 2 terawatt hours of storage in Bulgaria in hydro resources, including 3 pump storage hydropower plants, we understand very well the importance, and we, as I mentioned in the beginning, focus a lot of efforts to increase this capacity. In this aspect, we develop and focus a lot of efforts to develop 2 large-scale new pump storage hydropower plants in Bulgaria, which should have storage capacity of 35 to 40 gigawatt hours, which is and installed capacity of close to 2,000 megawatts together, which is quite notable, both storage and installed capacity even on European level. And of course for our region it would significantly support this gap in the production and consumption patterns. Still, what is specific here, same as with the large infrastructure, other infrastructure investments, is first the long period to develop, to construct and commission such a project, 8 to 10 years, considering of course also the strict environmental requirements and the challenges to construct together with the underground infrastructure, huge tunnels which need to be constructed. And the other aspect is of course the bankability, which requires on one hand side proper price signals, same as it was discussed about the gas demand, and stability of the policies and outlook. So if the investment will start to generate or produce revenues only in 8 to 10 years from now, and it will be paid back for 20, 30 years, it's clear that investors need to have at least some reasonable stability ahead of them in order to enter in these heavy investments. So this is something what policymakers should also really focus on, I believe, to support such investments which are crucial for the decarbonization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Georgiev. Yes, indeed, these services are extremely critical and they are needed to be in place in order decarbonized system to continue functioning. As you know, on European level there is already initiative where minimum flexibility for each system is prepared, and probably in the future this will help us to really overcome these issues. But as we are now, let's say, aggressively walking on this path toward decarbonization, there are systems who already walked through all these uncertainties and problems and can really announce that they are decarbonized, they are operated in an environmentally safely manner, and still they are reliable and resilient to all the events bringing the energy to the households they are operating. And by this respect, I would like to ask Mr. Dyke, who is Executive Director of the National Energy System Operator of the United Kingdom, to give us an insight how really did this happen, because we know that there is a very positive experience, and this is not something new, but this is a path we just need to walk by.
No, you're absolutely right, and I'll probably finish with where you want me to start, which is how we are making it happen in Great Britain. So we are the National Energy System Operator. We've been in place since the 1st of October this year. So a new organisation. So we are no longer owned by National Grid. We are owned by UK government. And the key change for us as a business is changing the E from electricity to energy. So we now have a responsibility. Well, I have the responsibility for keeping Britain's lights on every day, which is no small feat. But we also have the accountability for ensuring we can optimise across all energy vectors to ensure we can hit 2050 targets at least cost to consumer, so they're secure and actually they are done with clean power as well. So it's a new role that we've delivered. Come on the 1st of October, a very new organisation. One of the first bits we've looked at is how do you decarbonise the energy sector. Now that's looking at clean power, it's looking at heat, it's looking at transport, it's looking at aviation. It's quite a big task to do, and it's going to take years, if not decades. And that's going to take a lot of collaboration across Europe and across the world in order to ensure that we learn from each other and actually do it at the right time and optimise for everyone. One of the first key bits of work we've done as a new organisation is recognise that in order to get to decarbonise energy sector, probably the easiest thing to do from a GB perspective is to clean up the power sector. So last week we published a report, a recommendation to the UK government of how they can deliver a plan to ensure that we have a clean power sector by 2030. Our analysis showed that it can be done. Our analysis shows actually it's the right thing for consumers from a cost perspective, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of collaboration, not just within the electricity sector, but with supply chains across to the gas sector, for example, with markets, giving financiers and investors certainty that they invest in their money in the right place. So it can be done, and it can be done with existing technology. So our figures show that with 50 gigawatts of offshore wind, for example, 22 to 27 gigawatts of battery storage, 5 to 8 gigawatts of long duration storage, in GB, we can hit clean power in 2030 and sustain that 24/7, 365 days a year. And that will put us in a really strong position to hit net zero by 2050. But going back to the way you started with the question, that hasn't just happened with the report that was published last week. Back in 2019, we set ourselves a really ambitious target that by 2025, so which is pretty much just 6 to 8 weeks away, we'll be able to operate the Great Britain electricity system carbon-free for small periods of time. That was quite a significant change for us, and we had to really rethink how we set out about doing that. So we had to work really closely with our continental colleagues in Europe to understand how we can optimize flows across interconnectors. We also set about looking at how can we create those natural technical services you get from things like gas-fired power stations. So developing new markets for inertia, for fault levels, for stabilities, but using zero carbon technology to actually provide the service. So we're getting services from synchronous compensators, for example, from batteries, providing the service that would traditionally have come from coal-fired power stations. And coal-fired power stations is absolutely key. So the last one in Great Britain closed on the 30th September 2024. We have no more coal-fired power stations in UK, and we will never have any more coal-fired power stations in UK. That's a significant step for us, but it's one that didn't happen overnight. It took a hell of a lot of collaboration and cooperation over a significant number of years. We're at the stage now where our system has run at 95% levels of renewables, which I know some other countries around the world do. But the challenge for us as an islanded nation is we are not synchronously connected to other systems. Our frequency is 50 hertz for GB. It isn't the same as anywhere else. When I go and see my European colleagues and I go to their control rooms and their frequencies at flat at 50 hertz, that is like a daydream for me. It's the stuff I want to wake up in the morning and see. Our frequency bounces around 50 hertz every single second, every single day. And it is very different to where it was 30 or 40 years ago. And it's important to say it isn't harder, it is just different. So we've had to develop new tools, new services, new markets, and also help our employees understand what it's going to take to do that as well. I guess where I'm going with this is going back to where winter was really tight in 22, 23. You had the gas crisis in Europe. We got through that, and I know that our interconnected countries got through that. So a hell of a lot of collaboration and cooperation about optimizing interconnected flows. But we shouldn't just think it's not just about the physical side. We also have to optimize commercially as well to make sure markets are aligned and designed so they are compatible with each other. So if Great Britain has an excess of wind and free power, it isn't turning it off. It's able to sell it to some part of Europe so it can get the benefit of that same amount of wind power. That has to be the right answer, and we should really roll that out across the European level as well. So we must look at things such as physically cooperating, commercially cooperating, and we must have to do this at pace because we need to do this at pace. Time is running out, and through that we can learn together, and from where we are, we can actually develop together and actually all hit the targets we're all being asked to achieve.
Thank you very much. I see, and I'm really glad that there is a, let's say, light at the end of the tunnel. And I already have heard about this, but the way you are explaining it, now I get more confidence that in the future, with the decarbonized system, I'll still have the same level of system security, the same level of security of supply, the grid forming services and ancillary services that I need actually as a TSO in order to operate. But this will need to happen through really extension of the network, through seamless integration between market and physics, through new systems, through even artificial intelligence, I would say. But in order to do all this, I think we'll need some money, you know, to be invested and for this to be done. And because we as, at least me as engineer, I'm really poor in this part, I would like now to thank you all and to ask to the stage Her Excellency Mrs. Iva Petrova, Deputy Minister of Energy of Bulgaria, and Mr. Jayesh Pramar, a partner in Baringa Partners, and Mr. Charles Cormier, Regional Director for Infrastructure for Europe and Central Asia, World Bank, in order to enlighten us a little bit how these projects can be financed and can happen in the future. So thank you once more very much.
We have two, or we have two.
Да. So, Mrs. Petrova, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Actually, I think there's, from the political point of view, we got a very strong messages and witnessed engagement on the needed reliable regional cooperation and collaboration, as well as connectivity, grids, and pan-European interconnectivity on energy transmission, but also storage and digital networks, to enable our ambitious decarbonization and climate change limitation and adaptation targets. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues and friends, Charles and Jayesh here. And maybe I can start with Jayesh, coming from global advisory practices. For those of you, I'm sure we all know, but Baringa has been named by Forbes as one of the best management consulting firms in 2023. That was the second time, I guess. And you're engaged globally on energy transition, sustainable retrofit, power of partnerships. So Jayesh, how does all this look from your perspective? Connectivity, ambitions, money that we need, what your advice to us and governments, TSOs would be to make all this fit for the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that it's an honor and privilege to be here at this event at the invitation of the Bulgarian Energy Ministry. The second thing is, it's the other aspect of this is that there's a huge amount of energy at this COP29. Apologies for the tautology, but it's great to see. And it demonstrates the power of will of humanity and the ingenuity that humanity is applying to the challenges that we face. The first thing I'm going to do is to make some observations very briefly on the remarks that have come before us. And we've talked about the level of investment that's needed. We've talked about the flexibility that's needed. We've talked about natural gas and the role that natural gas is playing, and we've talked about the decarbonization of electricity systems associated with that. Now, associated with that, there are a few points. First and foremost, it's the role of the consumer. You know, we need to look at that as well. That's a key element of, because what we can't do is to look at an infrastructure-driven solution that's going to answer the full needs of flexibility. The challenges associated with doing that will drive up costs substantially. The second a couple of comments is that I do believe that gas is a lower carbon route to a low carbon future, but where we're not introducing new customers to gas, that's the challenge. Where we've already got a country with gas in place and we've got the infrastructure there, gas and the increased use of gas can in some occasions actually be a lower cost to a low carbon future. System operation has to be cross-energy vector, and the UK and Craig's examples in terms of talking about that are a critical element in terms of driving us to that cross-system future. The critical challenge associated with that in the UK, and we're still experimenting with this, is the separation between planning and asset investment and looking at the new role of competition, which I'll come back to in a moment. And then the final element of this in terms of comments associated with this is that markets are important, but we've got to be careful around the operators in those markets so as to not make them too complex or too fragmented. We need to make the markets understandable, liquid and deep so that we do get good solutions associated with that. But let's go back to financing first. The cost of this transition is going to be huge. We've already talked about that. It will require a massive amount of capital expenditure, both for new sources of electricity, but also for all of the grid connections that are going to be required, both at the generation side, but also at the demand side, at the supply side. Funding is going to be there. Global funding is available. Supply chains will adapt. Costs associated with the different technologies will come down, and there's a lot of evidence in there from solar and wind energy in particular. We will need to progress across all energy vectors. Our speakers before talked about that as well. We cannot decide on a single energy vector today. We're going to need to progress all of those, including things like hydrogen associated with that. The supply of decarbonized energy will still need to be balanced against affordability and to ensure security of supply. Again, a point that's been made. But let me go back to the financing associated with that, which is something that Margaret Thatcher said going back a while. I'm going to quote Margaret Thatcher now, let's not forget this fundamental truth. The state has no source of money other than money that people earn themselves. If the state wishes to spend more, it can only do so by borrowing your savings or by taxing you more. And it is no good thinking that someone else will pay or provide grants. That someone else is you, ultimately. There is no such thing as public money. There's only taxpayers' money. Now, that's worthwhile keeping that in mind, because when we're talking about things like grants and subsidies, there's an entire money merry-go-round which ultimately comes back to consumers paying, consumers or taxpayers paying. Last couple of points associated with this. I've talked about the scale of investment that's required. I'm a true believer in competition driving out better incomes. But how do we focus that competition on those areas where private sector involvement can effectively play? And what role do we have in that competition? How do we make sure that the private sector doesn't view something as so risky that it raises the cost of capital associated with that? And a critical part of this transition is to design business models that enable this investment to be made at the right level of risk and therefore brings in lower cost capital where it is due. I'll pause for that now.
Thank you, Josh. And now, Charles, to you. You are representing the World Bank. Actually, that's a unique global partnership with a global impact on transition, and number one global climate financier among the multilateral development banks. So how these giga-scale cooperations and infrastructures and ambition that is back on the government plans looks from your perspective?
So thank you, Ms. Petrova, and great to be here. And first, I wanted to say that I wanted to welcome the non-paper of the government of Bulgaria on behalf of the APC countries to do more work in collaboration on transition, on energy transition. That's a great initiative, and we really applaud it. So what happened in Europe is in the last couple of years was pretty shocking. I think that we all know that there was the biggest shock ever experienced in gas energy markets, and the prices of gas went up by a factor of 4 to 5. The price of wholesale electricity did the same. But what's interesting is that Europe is coming out of that, I think, quite well. That most countries were able to manage that crisis and accelerate the clean energy transition. It's quite great to see. When you think about it, though, for over the how you get to net zero, there are two challenges. One is how to diversify your energy grids towards clean energy, and how do you integrate the grids. It's very clear to us that energy integration is going to be let you achieve the clean energy transition and much cheaper, better, more affordable. So it's great to see, for instance, that Europe adopted this target of connectivity of 15%. This morning, I heard from the Romanian Minister of Energy telling us that today the wholesale electricity price in Romania is $38 per megawatt hour because it's not connected enough. And so, connectivity is really important. We've been doing country-level transition assessments called country climate development reports, and it turns out that the cost of transition will be a couple of percent of GDP per country, and 10 to 15% is on transmission. And if you count storage, it's going to be up to even 25%. So the transmission is really important. If you self-rely, you miss out on the fact that countries have different energy mixes, and they may have different energy demand curves and so on. So for all those reasons, I really applaud the idea that the TSOs will collaborate and coordinate. What we are doing at the World Bank is after COP28, we heard that many countries wanted to triple. There was a COP28 pledge of tripling renewable energy by 2030 and doubling energy intensity. We developed two multi-phase approaches of $3.5 billion total to help countries do that. And on the clean energy transition, it's mostly about transmission networks, because most of the clean energy transition will be private sector led, and so what the public sector can do. So coming back to your question of how do we attract this amount of money that is needed, that's the basic question. And I think that what's interesting is connectivity and transmissions are typically public sector led. So there's the traditional project financing, and of course you can approach the EU Commission or the EU funds, the EBRD, IB, and the World Bank, and we'll be there to do that. We're financing several connectivity projects now. For instance, the Tunisia-Italy interconnector was financed by the World Bank last year, and we're working with Georgia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Azerbaijan on the Black Sea undersea cable. So there is this traditional. But we're also trying to figure out how do we attract private capital to the clean energy transition. And the World Bank has been putting together the World Bank Group, a guarantee platform managed by MIGA to try to do that. So we have different instruments to try to provide guarantees for non-commercial risks that the private sector cannot do. And we have instruments that are sometimes backed up by sovereign guarantees, sometimes not. And so if there is a transmission project that is riskier because you're dealing with two or more countries, and the TSOs are maybe not financially sustainable, then there are guarantee instruments. I forgot to say that one thing that came out of the energy crisis is that there was a lot of support packages, and we see that the TSOs in the region are not necessarily on the best financial footing, so lots of work needs to be done there. But at this COP, there's also, I think, some movement on Article 6, and what that means is that programs that can lead to large renewable energy targets could perhaps access carbon markets, and so there's that instrument. And we're in the World Bank group looking at how do we de-risk, and so we're looking at a new instrument called Originate to Refinance, so you can take a concessional loan and then pay it back faster, take it to the commercial market backed up by a AAA rating of the World Bank so that you can free up capital. So what I'm telling you is that in this space, there's a lot of innovations. We're thinking ourselves of some. We're open to some ideas with countries and private investors such as yourself, but we need to figure this out. We don't have a lot of time to peak the emissions by 2030. And I think Europe is right there. I mean, this collaboration you're doing is quite important. Let me end by saying that in this multi-phase approach that I talked about, we will do what we call a knowledge platform and try to bring countries together, ideas together. So we're happy to work with you under your leadership or with the TSOs if that's needed. But it's an exciting space to try to figure out how do we attract private capital to essentially traditionally public sector investments, and particularly transmission. So very important, this connectivity agenda.
Thank you. Indeed, it's challenging. I mean, when we look to the funding needs, it seems that they are huge. And what is available is public money, I mean, as EU money or IFIs, still seems a little bit insufficient considering the needs. And I truly believe that the only way to tackle this is actually to bet on efficient public-private partnerships. Otherwise, it just cannot work. And of course, we need to focus on interconnectivity because anyhow the strong partnerships are here, and without partnerships we cannot tackle the transition challenges, but we need also to interconnect. I mean, we have the regional partnerships that are in the CESEC region, in the North Seas and so on. So as the Minister said, we start regionally and then we level it up and interconnect these initiatives. And something that we didn't touch upon, but I guess it has a lot to do with reducing the risks and making all this happen, is actually something that comes back to us as governments on the legal and regulatory framework that should enable all these investments, because also a huge risk comes also especially when you talk about multi-country projects. If you don't have a certain level of synchronization or, adaptation of the legal framework to these multi-country initiatives. For example, for the Green Corridor and the subsea cable in the Black Sea, you have EU member states and non-EU member states, and part of the Green Corridor being a project of common interest, the other a project of mutual interest, so it gets kind of complicated. So I think we have also to look into the legal and regulatory framework to enable and to reduce the risk. So since we are much advanced in time, I will just leave the audience to dialogue with you in a more informal setup. Thank you very much for being here, for your time. And I think we had value-added exchanges, and this is to continue. It's enough for today. Thank you.
So thank you very much to you all. This closes the panel. Actually, I just wanted to say on my side that at the beginning of this panel I was a little bit puzzled because two ideas are fighting in my head. First one is, well, as father of two children, I would like to leave a greener world to them after I go. But on the other hand, as manager of National Dispatching Center, I'm a little bit scared to leave currently consumers without voltage and energy, because then it will not sound good for me. But from what I heard, the money is there, the will is there, the projects are already in place, and really through grids, cooperation, storage, and with the help of the people who know how to spend efficiently the money, we really can leave something to all our children, not only mine, of course. So thank you once more.